Welcome to MilSpouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to telling the stories of military families, one spouse at a time. Need some inspiration as you navigate military life? Moves, deployments, raising military kids, keeping your marriage together, career issues, and more? Get an encouraging, humorous outlook from a spouse who's been there for 30 years and more moves than she can count. Join host Jen McDonald, author of the book You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse who knows that we're stronger together. Grab your cup of coffee or a glass of wine and sit back and relax as Jen talks with military spouses, both new and experienced, who will give you real-life hope and support for your own MilSpouse journey.
Hey guys, welcome to Season 2 and happy 2019. I'm so excited to be back with you after a little bit of a break, and I have a lot to share with you today, so I'm excited. What's been happening? Well, I know it's the time of New Year's resolutions. By the time you listen to this, it'll be kind of later in January. So if you've made any, I'm curious to hear what you've decided on this year. If you have a word of the year or a mantra or just a goal, I would love to hear about it. I am not big on New Year's resolutions anymore because I find that, I don't usually stick to them actually. So I think it's better for me, for my personality, just if I decide to make a change, to just do it regardless of what time of the year it is. But that being said, I am totally on the Marie Kondo bandwagon. I've been watching that show because I've been needing to get my closet organized, and I just love her method. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go check it out on Netflix. I think she also wrote a book called The Art of Tidying Up or something like that. So anyway, it's all over social media. So I thought, well, let me go look at this. And I fully expected to kind of hate her. I figured it was silly and like, you can't tell me how many books to have in my house, that kind of thing. But she is just this most joyful, little peaceful person. And watching it has been ridiculously soothing. So I have been organizing a little. So maybe that is my New Year's thing. And one thing I have really been working on the past weeks is just taking some moments to reflect more, because I tend to kind of fill up my time. So I've been, excuse me, bear with me. I have a little bit of a scratchy throat today. But anyway, one thing I decided to do was to just be more mindful and listen and let the Lord just kind of tell me things and actually sit with it. So one thing that has come to me over and over is the thought that I don't really need a resolution. I just need to be sure to walk in love. So what that means for me is if I am loving God and loving others the way I'm supposed to, kind of everything else falls into place. So I'm going to read this to you. 1 John 4:11, my dear friends, if God loved us like this, we certainly ought to love each other. No one has seen God ever, but if we love one another, God dwells deeply within us and his love becomes complete in us. Perfect love. And I love that. So you see a little theme here, love. So the other thing that's been happening is that my son returned from an 8-month deployment, and we helped my daughter-in-law and the grandbaby move back into their house before he got home. They had decided to stay with family during the time he was gone. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. But before we get too much into that, I wanted to talk to you guys about the format going forward. As you know, we released, I believe, 18 episodes last fall, and it's been completely awesome and wonderful, but it's also extremely time-consuming, and it's not my paid job, let's just put it that way. It's just something I'm doing as a passion project, which I love, and I love hearing from you guys and hearing which episodes resonate with you and what you learned from them and how you connect with the guests I've had on. But one thing I've decided going forward is I just can't keep up that pace and also work and travel and do all the things that I've been doing. So for now, my goal is to have an episode every couple of weeks. If I can fit more in, great. But I should have something new up every other week. And for now, I think I will be switching off me, doing a solo and then, a solo podcast, just talking about different topics, alternating with a guest. And I'm really excited about the guests that are coming on this spring, this next season. I've I'm trying to be really mindful to bring on people that have experience and can kind of help you wherever you are in your military spouse journey, because that's what this is all about. You may have noticed I changed up the artwork and the tagline a little bit. This really is about encouraging you in your military spouse life wherever you are and whatever you're going through. So I'm loving the notes. I love the feedback on Instagram, especially if you haven't followed there to just kind of keep up. That's where I'm doing most of my social, just because, like I said, I have a finite amount of time and I find Instagram to be a little bit more engaging. So I'll post things on the stories there or the latest episodes or whatever's coming up. So that's Mil Spouse Matters. Just look for it on Instagram. So I did a poll recently and I asked, what is your greatest challenge as a military spouse? And I'm not really surprised. There were a couple of interesting things in there. So one of the big things, of course, is career and trying to keep a career going and figuring out what to do with moving. The other is marriage, how to keep your military marriage strong, finding community as a military spouse, and of course, moving, deployments. And then one even mentioned it's just hard to even be able to talk to her spouse because his job is so top secret and he can't talk about it with her. So we're going to be discussing all these things over the next couple of months. How to keep your military marriage strong, raising military kids, dealing with moves, finding other people to be friends with, and finding a community, because it's really hard, as you know, when you're moving a lot, to try to maintain those connections. So be looking for that. I'm super, super excited, like I said, for the guests that'll be coming up. So I'm kind of doing a lot of housekeeping, big quotes here, and I apologize for that because we're going to get to the topic in just a minute. One thing that I think, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts during my time away, and I know everybody asks listeners to review and everybody asks listeners to go on and leave a rating. And I think I just wanted to explain to you why. So one of the things is, if you're listening to a podcast and you like it, just take a second to go in whatever app you're in and hit the review, especially if you like it. If you don't like it, feel free to ignore this part. But if you like it, leave a review, leave a star rating, because the more of those that you get, the more your show will pop up for people looking for that kind of content. So that's really the big thing. It's not an ego boost. It's really nice to hear from people that they enjoy the show, obviously, because I'm just kind of sitting here behind a mic in my room and I can't see you. But it also helps get the word out to other listeners, and that's really what I want to do. I also wanted to mention there is a Facebook group. It's called Christian Military Spouses. If you would like to join that, all you need to do is just go search for it on Facebook, and then there's several questions for you to answer to be added. So yeah, I would love to see you there. We're on there, and I am doing a devotional every week or two. We haven't done one in a few weeks because of the holidays with Sarah Gates from Servant Mama. So we get on there and do a Facebook Live devotional every couple weeks. So that's been really fun. Okay, so enough of that. Today we're talking about deployment, and especially about deployment when maybe you've just recently PCS'd, or you're kind of new to a community, or you haven't had an opportunity to really connect yet. So I mentioned that my son just got back from a deployment, and my daughter-in-law, they're stationed kind of a remote base. So they have a 2-year-old, and they came down and stayed with us for a couple of months, and then she went and spent the rest of the time in Hawaii, which was understandable because it's a tiny little base with not a lot of family support, and she really didn't have a great community of friends yet, so I totally get that. But sometimes that's not an option. And also, I do have to mention, so we helped them move back last weekend, and I'm telling you, PCS is a young person's game. We have moved so many times, and I was so surprised how exhausted I was. If you're a longtime listener, my husband retired it's almost 2 years ago, after 30 years, and we definitely had our share of moves. So it's been a minute since we moved. It's been about 2 years, and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how exhausted I am, especially with a little one running around. But anyway, so hats off to all of you guys about to move or who've recently moved. But back to the topic. So if you are facing a deployment or a separation from your spouse and you just don't have a lot of contacts yet, I remember when we first got to North Dakota. So we had moved from Guam to North Dakota, and I told my husband, we had lived somewhere with a winter in a really long time. We had been like in Texas, Florida, Guam. We get to North Dakota, and I said, you should never say these things out loud. I said, well, As long as you don't get deployed, just get me through this first winter so we can get used to it. So you know what happened. He deployed, right? And you kind of like, your only person that you know might be somebody at the housing office or the realtor that helped you find an apartment. So what do you do when your only contact is someone like that? And you're at the youth center and you're filling out forms to sign your kids up for soccer, and you're just hoping another parent will make eye contact with you so that you can ask them to be your emergency contact. I mean, raise your hand. Been there? Yes, been there so many times. And so it's important to quickly get connected. But if you are dealing with being a recent transplant and a deployment, it's just so challenging. So let's talk about how to get connected. So if you have the opportunity to maybe go back to visit family or to have a trip coming up, that's great. But if not, let's talk about some ways to get connected in your new community to help you get through this deployment. So I had polled listeners on my author Facebook page last year because I was using it for a blog post, which never came about. So I will be sharing some tips from other experienced spouses. So here are a few things that they have to say. So Christiane says, here's her advice. Get connected with the command so that you can feel comfortable calling the first sergeant or key spouse or whatever you call it in your service branch in case of an emergency and to stay informed. She says, I always recommend spouses attend a newcomer's brief every time they move. It's a great opportunity to learn a little bit about the area and collect contact information from the support services on base, especially to learn about valuable programs offered by Family Support and MWR. And I totally agree with that. I have made friends at the newcomers meeting. I've made friends in TLF, temporary lodging, waiting for housing. So if it's not something you would normally do, maybe branch out a little bit and just attend one of the, military functions or the programs that they offer so that you could connect with other new folks. So Leanne, who is from Australia, which I love this, that she gave her input on this. She says, I turned up at playgroups wherever I located them, made friends with some of the mums as that first time. None of the rest of my husband's team had either at-home partners or children, so finding connections via his team was not the best option. So that's a good one. Liz Ann from The Seasoned Spouse, you'll be hearing more from her this season, and she was also just on the holiday episode, and you might know her from her blog. She said, kind of agreed with that. She said, I hung out at playgrounds to meet other moms and ask them questions about the base. Jennifer says, I would suggest to get involved in as many community activities as possible, especially if you have little ones. I made it a point to schedule one big outing or event a month, so my girls had something to look forward to and to keep their minds off the deployment. The last big event was Dad's return. They were sad Dad was not home, but it gave them something to look forward to and have stories to share with him when he returned. So Stacy says, Spouses Club. And I know a lot of folks don't like Spouses Club, and the minute they hear that, they're like, no, thank you. But I will tell you, I've been in some amazing spouses groups. When we lived in Hawaii, they had an amazing Spouses Club, and they had little mini clubs is what they called them. So maybe you have something like that near you where you don't have to go to the big, intimidating function, but maybe they have little subgroups like a reading club or a book club. We had a hiking club, adventure club. We had a foodie night, wine night. So maybe just check it out and see if there's something that would interest you. Sarah from Servant Mom says, find a church and get involved. Showing up, sitting in the pew, and walking out without really talking to anybody won't work. They need to know you. Go to a small group or serve in some way, and that will open the door to those relationships. Totally agree with that. Great tip. Leanne adds, local churches, even if not a churchgoer, has events like craft groups or offers book club. If you're an at-home parent, they may also offer affordable in-session childcare. Going to church is also a great way to build your new support network. When we had our surprise edition, I hadn't been to church in years, and my husband suggested it would be great to get into a community that is nurturing. It was great as I ended up in a home group that provided excellent support for the months he was away, as well as being a great support during reintegration, especially having a new baby who arrived a few weeks after his return. I'll add my tips to this. Number one is don't be afraid to ask for help. I know it's hard, especially if you're new and you don't know anybody. So when Steve left for Iraq, when we first got to North Dakota, I tell this story a lot, so I apologize if I've told this on here before. I don't think I have, but I really didn't have what I would say are friends yet. So probably about a third of his squadron deployed, including him and the commander. They were in charge of the squadron. And I had 4 small kids at home, and the commander's spouse had 4 small kids at home. And this was back when we were very first setting up the Key Spouse program in the Air Force. And so we were very concerned about getting support for the deployed spouses. And there was one day I looked at her and we kind of, we said, well, who's going to check on us? And we decided that because we were making, like, this is back in the day of the phone trees. So if you don't know what that is, I'm sorry. I'm old. So we would make calls pretty much every week to check on spouses because there were so many of them. We had to rotate it. So we decided that one week, one of us would make calls and the other one would be off, and that person would check on the other one, if that makes sense. So we kind of rotated being on and off so that we were also getting the care that we needed. And it wasn't even necessarily that I needed anything, but it was just nice to know if I had to run, for an emergency, I could call her and she would watch my kids and vice versa. So look for something or someone you could switch off with, even if it's just someone within your spouse's unit that is designated as that. They are there to help. Make use of them. And if you really need something, don't be afraid to ask. Jump into your community. I think some of those suggestions were great. I know it's hard, especially when you're dealing with feeling down because of deployment. But the only way people are going to know you is if you get out there. And if one avenue doesn't work, try another. Don't give up. If the spouses group is not your cup of tea, here are some other ideas. So go old school. I found a homeschool group at a Starbucks once this way, just a few years ago. It was on base at the Starbucks. We had just moved there. And I was kind of going, well, I'm not really sure how I'm going to meet people. And I saw a little flyer for the local homeschool group, and we were homeschooling, and that's how I found them. If we talked about already, if you're staying in temporary lodging, like if you just arrived and you found out your spouse is deploying or leaving, start talking to people in temporary lodging at the newcomers briefing. Just put yourself out there. Be visible. Meet your neighbors. Go knock on doors. I'm a big proponent of take some brownies, take some cookies to meet your neighbors. I have never had anybody turn that away. So if you have more ideas, if you are there right now, I would love to hear from you, what tips you have, how it's going for you. I know winter, when this comes out, is a hard time to be separated from your spouse. Just kind of stinks. And you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I'm with you, and so are so many others. So please hang in there. One resource I do have for you, other than my book, is that I have a free 5-day deployment devotional on my site. So if you go to milspousematters.com, there's a tab there, and I will link it in the notes here to just go in. All you got to do is put your email in, and you can just download it. And it's a free deployment devotional for you. And I really, really wrote that with hopes that it would help you. So again, welcome back to this season. I am so excited with what's to come and kind of switching things up a little bit and getting to talk to you more personally. In the meantime, while you're waiting for the next episode, there's so much good stuff from the first season. We've got former active duty folks on there that are now military spouses themselves. There are spouses on there talking about all sorts of topics, including living overseas, staying positive when you don't know what military life will bring you, even decorating military housing or a rental. We have a great episode from a spouse who dealt with postpartum depression. She had a baby while her husband was deployed. So go back and look that one up, Lauren Sikora. Finding Your Identity, Lana Simmons, A Veteran's Journey Through PTSD. Finding your strength as a military spouse and making peace with military life. So much good stuff. There's 18 episodes. So I hope you'll go check it out and catch up with where we've been. And in the meantime, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I am so excited. I wanted to greet the listeners that are listening from all over the world. So this has been kind of fun. We have listeners from Portugal, Canada, the UK, Australia, Italy, Mexico, Sweden, Germany, Indonesia, Spain, Hong Kong. It's amazing. Hello, everybody. I'm waving at you. Thank you so much for listening and finding us somehow. Whether your spouse is deployed, about to leave, or just you're separated for a while, know that my heart is with you. And until next time, I hope you have a great week.
Connect with Jen at jenmcdonald.net or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also purchase her book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Love the show? Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes. Until next time, have a great week.